Maximizing Biological Diversity for Ultimate Crop Health with Julie Rawson of Many Hands Farms. My name is Anna Muhammad. I'm with NOFA Mass. I'm their Food Access Director. I'm based here in Springfield, Massachusetts, Western Mass. I am joined today in the co-hosting duties by Christine Manick. She is our soil health grants manager. And so we're happy to be able to co-host this workshop together today for you all. Any questions that come up, any technical issues, you can reach us both in the chat. We just have a few housekeeping things to go over before we get started with today's presentation. NOFA Mass is working to deepen our commitment to racial equity and justice, including honest work examining whiteness and dismantling systems of white supremacy that are part of many dominant systems, including our agricultural and food systems. In honor of the indigenous families and indigenous nations that were and are the stewards of the lands that we farm and live in currently, we ask that you take time. You can use the link that's here in this slide to identify the indigenous nation that is in your area. I am broadcasting from Pecumtuck land, which is Springfield, Mass, which is modern day Springfield, Mass here in Western Massachusetts. And you can find that by using this link, native-land.ca/. So feel free to use that to locate the indigenous nation in your area. Racial equity in action. We are making a call to action to conspirator organizations and ally organizations to assist and to be allies to BIPOC-led organizations. We have some examples of what you can do to assist in that area. You can share resources with a BIPOC-led organization. You can support legislation that will begin to talk and advance the work towards reparation, and then you can work towards protecting the rights of farm and food workers. And then we have one event that will take place tomorrow. It's a BIPOC caucus that will be from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. We want to give a brief shout out to our sponsors who are supporting this conference, our wonderful sponsors. Please check them out. They are both in your program book. They have links there, and some of them may provide discounts while you're attending the conference. So you're looking at our gold sponsors now. And we're showing you our silver sponsors. You can do the same with this grouping of sponsors. We are very grateful to them for their support of the conference. Our online auction, please visit the auction. It will be available, I believe, up until Sunday night. They have a lot of great products there, and we will put the link in the chat so that you can access that. The virtual vendor marketplace. We have duplicated our normal in-person vendor marketplace with our virtual one. Please visit them. They have links in the program book. Again, they will also be providing some level of discount for those who are attending the conference. And without any more from myself, I will now stop sharing my screen and turn everything over to Julie Rawson, who can start sharing the screen now. And I'm excited for this workshop. So Julie, you can take it away at this point.
All right. Oh, here we go. Is that right? Does that look good now?
Perfect.
Okay.
Looks good.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to point out on the topic of Indigenous peoples, there's a wonderful book that I just finished reading by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz called An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. She's really talks seriously and honestly about, you know, this whole, our history and culture of, you know, basically coming in and using genocide to work our way across the country. So it's kind of a downer, but it's also good to know that kind of history. So, well, interesting book you might want to check out. So this is about maximizing diversity for ultimate crop health. And sometimes the title is maximizing photosynthesis for ultimate crop health. And it's pretty much the same story that we need to do a lot of different things in order to have the healthiest food that we can possibly have. And so this is just a picture, whoops, sorry. That's a picture of our potatoes in 2019. Was a year where they just came through stupendously, no potato bugs and huge crops. And I would be very happy if we could get all of our crops to look perfect every year. And every year we get some that are really great and some that aren't doing so well. And, you know, it's kind of a crapshoot, but it's nice to have really high performance from time to time so you can really see what you're looking for. So I just want to go quickly through our practices so you can get a sense of who we are and what where we come from on all this. So we are in Barre, Massachusetts, which is right in the middle of the state of Mass. And we bought our land in 1980 and built our house in 1982. We've been certified since 1987 with, first NOFA Mass and then now Bay State Organic Certifiers. We do about 2 acres of vegetables. We have about 100 fruit trees. I didn't note on here, but we also have a lot of small fruits, blueberries and blackberries and black raspberries, red raspberries and aronia and grapes and all sorts of other stuff too. This year we're planning to raise 250 meat birds on pasture, 125 turkeys also on pasture, 200 layers. The layers are free ranging at this time of the year. They have a winter home that we open the door and they run around the farm. And then during the vegetable growing season, they get locked up into these mobile homes so that they don't destroy things, but they can also help with our fertility. And we have 8 pigs this next year. We did 12 in 2021, but they live mostly in the woods. We have about 7 acres of grassland and we have about 44 acres of woods. Our gross revenue in 2021 was $150,000. So you get a sense where, a small farm, but maybe not that small in Massachusetts. So I've kind of added, as the years go by, a punch list, I guess you could call it, of things that we do on the farm as a baseline. And then everything else is, based around that. So the first thing we do is mineral balancing soil amendments as per soil tests. So in the fall, try to do that around September 15th, if I remember, to get a soil test, and it gives you an annual picture of the soil fertility from that standpoint, from digging up 6 inches and sitting that soil test in. To see, there are some things on the edge of my, okay. We don't use any tillage equipment anymore. We used to have a big, a 4-foot drive behind our tractor, pull behind our tractor, rototiller, and a hand rototiller. 2014 kind of had a come to a no-till moment, and at a workshop with Graham Sate that NOFA actually was running, the Soil and Nutrition Conference with the Bionutrient Food Association, and he really spoke very strongly, and such that it was very. I took home this message that we really needed to do something about our practices in order to really be sequestering carbon, bringing it back from the atmosphere, whatever you call it, leaving the carbon situation better than we found it instead of burning it off. And tillage is one of the ways that, and pesticides and herbicides and all the sides basically that really do not such great things to the soil, keeping it open, etc. So we sold our tillage equipment, and we have been trying to figure out how to operate without a rototiller ever since. We do have a ripper bar that we put on the back of our tractor, but we only used it for about half hour this year. We have a tractor, I'll show you pictures of that, and a rotary mower behind it that we cut hay with, and hand mowers, and then our major tool that we use for bed prep is a rogue hoe, and I'll show you pictures of that. We are heavy users of mulch in season, cardboard, hay, chips, leaves. I'm actually getting straw this year too. So corn stalks, whatever you can find, really. We cover crop whenever possible, in season, pre-season, post-season. And in the last 2-3 years, we've added silage tarps, and I feel like we're still on the learning edge on that one. But one of the things that I've learned that's wonderful about silage tarps is that we can put them down. You can plant things like rye and vetch, which are perennial cover crops, which are wonderful for the soil, but they're very hard to get rid of when you want to plant. So what I've learned is that, we can plant those in the fall, we can mow them right before we put the tarp down, and then that will actually do those in a nice fashion so that you can plant through them. Animal integration is something we've done from the start. We've always had a lot of animals and a lot of vegetables and a lot of fruit, and try to have it all run in this kind of like in concert all the time together. So we have them in on the vegetable crops whenever we can after the crops are out. We need to follow that 120-day rule for certification. You can't have an animal on the soil less than 120 days if you're going to harvest something from there. So that means doing it in the fall, generally speaking, and so that you're good for the spring. There's that apple guy in New Hampshire that really talks about perennial strips to maximize biodiversity. We have a few of those planted here and there in our vegetable fields, and then also in our hedgerows. We're right in the woods in central Mass, this part of North, we're right in the middle of central Mass, but we're on the northern edge of that, and it's very wooded here. Carving vegetable areas out of the woods is more likely what you're going to find here, and there's not really a whole lot of open land. But the beautiful thing about that is that there's a lot of biodiversity around us, and a lot of opportunities for pollinators naturally, but we try to enhance that as much as we can. And then, the last thing that we do, which has been an upgrade, I think, in the last really earlier than 2014 when we went no-till, but really in a more intelligent, I would say, or organized fashion, is to use extensive liquid fertility at planting and weekly foliar applications, and also not just foliar, but also some drenches that we use. We work with a consultant at Advancing Eco Agriculture and use their products and those products from Tineo Technology and a few other places. A lot of minerals, biostimulants, and then biologicals. So, we take lots of care with our fertility. Here is just an example of one of our soil tests on one of our fields. And this, just to give you a sense, the TEC is the exchange capacity. We are a little on the sandy end, but definitely not sandy here. So it's not terribly high, but it's not low. pH should be about 6.4. This field is 6.5, really right where we want it. The organic matter is 10.23, which is really high, which is a very good thing to have it really in that space. And then sulfur, that's our measurement of our sulfur, our phosphorus, calcium. Generally speaking, at this point in time, due to a lot of addition of calcium lime and gypsum and rock dust and a lot of other things, our calcium is a little on the high side, but better to have that high than not. Magnesium and the potassium at this point are still a little below, but we're able to bring that up with foliar applications during the summertime. Sodium is good. Boron, some of these ones, these boron's not a micro, I guess it is, but like zinc, copper, molybdenum, selenium, silicon, these are all, it's hard to get those numbers up to a decent place. We're working slowly on that, and you can see that they're on their way. And one of
Julie,
the, yeah,
can we ask a quick question about the
absolutely.
apple person that you mentioned? Someone was asking, was that John Bunker? Is he the apple person that
Oh,
you're
no,
referring to?
it's not. It's the, he was our keynoter one year, and Michael Phillips and his wife is a herbalist, and they are, they're big on herbs and perennials and such. And so anyway, he's got a good book, Mycorrhizal Planet, that's worth reading if you want to follow up on. It really explains what mycorrhiza is all about and how it works, and it's a very good book. These are things that this kind of the when I went over our soil test with Nathan Harmon, who's our AEA rep, these are the kind of things he suggested. That organic matter is high, the phosphorus is in good abundance, which is really good, pH is ideal, and then magnesium and foliar, magnesium and potassium, we need to continue to keep an eye on those, make sure that those are high enough to be in balance. So here is what we're going to do based on our soil test. We'll be adding these things this year. Boron via solubar, sorry, it's a rock, a powdered ingredient that you can buy. Redmond salt, potassium sulfate, some manganese sulfate, zinc sulfate, elemental sulfur. And one of the things we're going to try differently this year than we have in the past is actually, we have numbers for how much we need to do per acre. We're going to be mixing those up and then dividing those into 4 applications for the vegetables. So there's a little more, like when you turn over a bed and put something new in, or when we're kind of spaced throughout the year. And then 2 applications on the fruit trees and berries to help make those a little more useful. My feeling is, and John Kemp will say, he's never seen manganese numbers go up on plants by adding manganese in rock powder form. For example, some things are better. Zinc is a little better at bringing things up. So it's kind of one of the things that it seems it's a good thing to do, is to add, elements and, products in the soil. But what I have learned is that the foliar applications and the liquid applications are much more effective for quicker results. So rock dust, here's another thing that this is last year, actually 2020, we got it in 2020 and spread 22 tons of rock dust on our vegetables and our fruits. And that's something that you can maybe do like every 5 or so years to really bring in 99 different minerals that are really good trace minerals that really help improve the soil structure and improve your ability to photosynthesize better. This is kind of a cheap chance for me to show off my grandchildren, but this is our 2 little guys using the Rogue hoe, which is a very, it's really one of our major tools for the farm. And we have 4-foot beds that we set up in the old days because we have our tractor has a 4-foot spread between the tires. And then the pathways are about 20 to 22 inches. And then when we turn over a crop, we'll come through, mow as needed, and then hoe out the trash, and then just rebuild the beds in place using these Rogue hoes. And here's another picture of us. You can see here we laid out sticks and strings to make sure that we had a good measurement on these beds, and then come through with the hoe and make rows. And here's the ripper that we actually got that through a IMDAR grant, which was very nice. And we used it a little bit more the first year we got it, 2019 or 2020. Did a nice job of, going through the soil without actually tilling, but I found also that the annual weeds were really came back more aggressively than I wanted to. And we barely had the tractor on the field this year at all. And so we're hardly using it, but we did use it when we needed to plant our garlic after we had corn and turkeys and a few other things, and the soil was a little bit heavy. So we made those rows for the garlic this year.
Julie?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We see there's one more question.
Yep.
From Juan concerning microorganisms. Do you also work with microorganisms?
Well, all the time. Juan, do you want to ask that more in person, and maybe we can get more to what you're asking really? I mean, it's all about microorganisms, but can you ask a follow-up question?
And Juan, you can take yourself off of mute.
Hi.
Go right ahead, Juan.
Yes. So no, I saw the list of the amendments and the things you use, which they're great. They're really beneficial. But for us, it's been even a better way of incorporating those elements or minerals or whatever with the microbes. They have done really an amazing job for us, even for disease suppression in our gardens and in trees too.
What are you using when you say microorganisms?
Yeah, I am from South America, and there is a teacher, Jairo Restrepo, who teaches how to collect from healthy soils microbes, reproduce them, and also use them as sprayers or directly into the soil.
Right.
And yeah, it's really simple. Instead of buying from companies, you could buy them too.
Yeah, yeah.
We use those.
There's something that Korean natural farming does that, or the bokashi, I think it's called, that the Japanese do. And then there's a lot of people will brew their own by just setting up a big 55-gallon tank and putting in some food source and, really getting and putting in your comfrey and your dandelions and sometimes a starter to really brew your own too. So yes, absolutely. We've been in various periods of do-it-yourself microbe establishment in the past, not presently doing it, but not that we wouldn't necessarily go back to it. I think, however, and I think, of course, if you come from perhaps where you are in South America, I don't know what country, but where people don't have as much access to a lot of products, you can do all this on your own. You don't really need to buy any products, for sure. I'm totally behind you on that one. So here we are with our fruit trees, and I want to spend a little time on them because we've had fruit trees since we first came here in 1980, and not all of these trees are 40 years old, but this one we planted probably in 87. It's a Baldwin apple tree. So it's been around for a good while. And we, ran our chickens underneath them and our cows and, put down some fertility, had nice grass pasture, etc. But never really could get any apples particularly. We got peaches, we got pears, but never any apples. And we started really upping our game on the fruit trees. And when I started work closely with AEA and getting these liquid minerals applications and doing this on a weekly basis, we've now have, huge crops of all sorts. I'll show you that later. But one of the things that we did this past year, you can see the rock dust there. That's the gray kind of around the tree. And then we put down massive amounts of cardboard. And on top of that, I'll show you that we put down, we got 7 big tractor trailer loads of wood chips in the end of 2020. And then put those down in 2021 around the trees. And you can see here's Kashan actually spreading them around this tree. You see it's a very small, young little tree, but we just laid it on super, super thick. And what that does is it sets the stage for the trees. We've got the cardboard, which worms love. And when worms are there and happy, then they're gonna, the microorganisms also replicate fast, and you have a lot of very busy underground operation going on there. And the wood chips will break down, the cardboard wood chips will break down and become real food for the microbes in the system. You can see a tree there behind this one where it's, the chips are a little bit older, but it's a good way to manage your trees and keep them out of weeds and other things too, but also just feed them, seriously feed them while you're growing them. And oops, am I frozen? Can't seem to move my, there we go. Here's some grapes that we have on an arbor set up. I mean, actually a fence little sign up set up. So we can come through and mow that grass with a mower, and then the grapes are very heavily mulched underneath. Also, they also perform quite well. And we do a lot of hand harvesting of our own hay. We aren't big enough to actually have haying equipment. And you can see the trees in the background. We're surrounded by woods, but here we are. I probably have this a little out of order, but there's Anthony raking the hay with a ground-driven rake, old-fashioned. You just hook it up and rake it, and then prior to that, which I probably should have shown, I don't have a picture of that, is just mowing it with a rotary mower, a pull behind rotary mower. So we're kind of low tech and no fancy equipment. That tractor is a 1980 Ford 2120. So, real workhorse, but nothing fancy. And then here's just an example, show you our hay that we sometimes buy in. This was actually free hay we got. You can see it's growing there, that we got in for mulch. So I want to move into some of the mulching stuff. I can't see what my titles are because of the names are on the top. How do I move those to the side, Christine?
You might be able to just click on all the pictures and names and just move them somewhere else, or you could maybe move.
Okay. All right. It's just, there we go. Okay. Got it. Thank you. Mulching. Yeah. So mulching, I think, is a very important, it's something that I learned from my mother. She learned from, oh my goodness, who was that mulch lady back in the 50s and 60s? Who was big into mulch. Anyway, her name's not coming to me. And I kind of took that along with me when I left home, that mulching is a really good way to go. I can't speak highly enough for mulching when it's possible. You can't mulch everything. It's very hard to mulch radishes, for example, and lettuce and things like that. But when possible, in a crop like garlic here, we really prepare the soil quite well for garlic. And I'll show you later some pictures from 2020 of an amazing pepper crop that was planted in this whole area that's below our house here is super, super thick with organic matter and really rich and fertile because we've used a lot of mulch here. But we plant the garlic in the fall and then mulch it very, very heavily. And that will stay there in place until we harvest. And that will keep the soil covered and keep the microbes happy and the earthworms happy, which is really what we're about, is really keeping your biology, one way or another, keeping your biology thriving throughout the whole season as much as possible. And here's just a picture of our parsley and below it the squash that we harvest, the squash is, you can't see it, it's in the foreground, that we mulch this area very heavily. I'll talk to you about this particular area in a minute when I talk about opening new land. And here's another thing that we use is leaves. We didn't harvest quite as many big totes of leaves this year as we have in the past, but those are another resource that's free to you. And we have fun collecting those in the fall. Here we are on the road, collecting leaves and just with a tarp and then putting them into big totes that we have gotten grain in or potting soil or something like that. And again, you can see how the trees are everywhere. And right down this road is it's a scenic road. So those are big, monstrous oak trees that are fantastic, but they also kind of reach out over our very small areas of relatively small areas of growing area that, so we have a hard time carving out too much area, very much area for growing vegetables. So here's moving into cover crops, and I have really tried to get better at this over the last 10 years, probably, of intersowing cover crops in season. And this doesn't show it quite as well as I would like, but I didn't have an earlier picture. This is Swiss chard that was, we weeded it and mulched it early in the season. And then basically when we would come to harvest, the part of the crew would kind of rip out some of the crimson clover and kind of rip off the tops of it to fight it back a little bit so that the chard could come up and do well. But this is like late October, we're still out harvesting it. And it was interesting that this year we only ever had, the spots that you can get on Swiss chard, and they can turn brown and crispy if they are unhappy. We only had a very small amount of that, and it was where the cover crops were not well established. And so it's like you want to have a nice balance between having too much cover crop in there so that they don't choke out your plants, but they seem to provide a good support system for some crops. And we've found over the years that chard is a good one to put in. Crimson clover is what I use. Here's corn is a fun crop to cover crop because it grows so tall, and you can get away with putting a lot of stuff in there. And you can see a broad mix of cover crops in that pathway between these two rows of corn. And if you were wanting to do our ultimate cover cropping, we want to have in there some legumes, and we want to have in there some grasses, and we want to have some brassicas, and we want to have some forbs, which are kind of like larger leaved plants like buckwheat or like sunflowers or something that. So these are different families that are going to bring in different kinds of partner microbes into the system below. The more different kinds of microbes that we can have that are working with the root systems of not only our crop, but also our support crops, the more we can access more minerals and all the things that the plants need to grow well. So it's about this whole diversity thing. So go wild with your corn. It's nice and tall, and it's going to be taller than any of your cover crops. You don't want to wait to plant till it's about 18 inches tall, but then you can really build fertility in a corn patch. And for that year, but also for the next year, keeping that in mind, what's going to happen here next year? How can I really build this fertility? Here's a nice stand of oats, peas, daikon after potatoes, actually. And I'm going to cover this in a couple minutes here too, but you'll see there are chicken houses in the back of that field, and they're coming toward us. So this is part of our strategy of really getting some manure on there and good feed for the chickens, and again, establishing more biodiversity. And here is our tomatoes, and we undersowed crimson clover in those also this year, and that worked quite well. You can't really see it because it's kind of looked like it's grown in, but we kept a little bit of a blank space right up next to the tomatoes so that they're not being choked, and then also kept that clover low as needed so that it doesn't overwhelm. And using tarps. I think I said earlier, when you're not tilling, it's very hard to, in our situation, deal with grass because we have grass coming in from everywhere. It's our biggest challenge in our fields. It used to be annual weeds used to be our biggest challenge when we were tilling, but we're not now. So we have some annual weeds, but they're not the huge challenge they used to be. Tarps are very good to be able to, at the, let's say, I think what we're going to do this year, I think it's going to be the most practical, and we have our early crops that want to come in April, May. We will start putting the tarps down in about March to over the soil so that the sod or whatever it is that's growing under there can slowly die back. And Michael Phillips will tell you that in terms of keeping your mycorrhizae alive. They can live about 12 weeks on a dead root. And so as you're thinking about that, as we are slowly killing these things off, there's still food for the soil life to stay alive, so that when you uncover it and then you start putting new plants in it, there's something there. There are some microbes there. If we have a bare soil and have left it bare all winter or for any extended period of time, the microbes starve to death essentially. And when they starve to death, it takes a huge amount of energy to get them back into the system again. So tarps, we learned that we have to have lots of sandbags and they have to be pretty full. We spent a lot of time picking up tarps that blew away last year. That's part of our learning curve, but we now bought these nice black sandbags and got a whole load of sand. And so if you have enough sandbags and they're full enough, the tarps will stay down. I can tell you that. Here's a one that I will, I'm gonna go back to this picture, but it's another place where we tarped. So pigs on the edges of the woods, we can put them into the fields if you're going to be able to plant something right away afterward. But what happens with our pigs is that we are always harvesting them in November. So find that it's not great to raise them in the vegetable areas because they really will just totally, as you can see, pretty much decimate that. So that was sod right there. Took them 2 weeks to do that. But that's so they live in the woods and on the edges of the woods so that we can run these houses that they have. We entice them into the house with some feed, block the door, hook up the tractor, take down the electric fence and move them to the new spot. And that's how we manage those pigs throughout the season. And they're also great for, like, we made, I don't know, 100 gallons of cider this year. And, they like all the cider leavings and anything else you can bring out that's of great food value for them. They can also, if they're in the woods, they can eat acorns, and they do a lot of rooting and get a lot of their dinner from the woods, from the floor of the woods. This is a little picture, just give you a better sense of our turkey and chicken tractors, but these are little kids that are just, turkeys just been out on pasture as soon as we can. Right now they're sticking around the house in this picture, close to the house, and where we can keep an eye on them and make sure that they're safer from predators and such. But these houses are moved every single day to new place for them. They can eat and then move on. Here are some turkeys, and I'll show you in the next picture too, but this you'll see in the underneath the turkeys, you see a lot of different kind of cover crops coming up, and you see some corn stalks. So if you think back to that corn that you saw earlier, we planted the corn and harvested it, we mowed it down, and then we put in another set of cover crops with some probably oats, peas, and daikon again. And you'll see some of these other crops came back, some of these really very broadleaf crops that came back from the first planting of cover crops in there. And then once those had come up, we ran the turkeys over this land. And then as soon as the turkeys were out, then we planted the garlic. So we're talking about, really maximizing that fertility for that space. And garlic is an important crop for us, and we like to have it be as healthy as possible. So this has been a system that's worked quite well for us. It's really fun when I can figure out how to get those birds in there and still meet my 120 rule and do all sorts of other things, kind of like a circus. And here they are a little further back picture. You can see someone moving the house, someone in the front with a dolly, someone in the back grabs the bars, and we go one move a day, and we're moving through the garden and going to be out on the edge of the field pretty quick there. And there's some comfrey here in the foreground, which I just want to point out that if you have the opportunity, you should plant comfrey wherever you can. It's something that is incredible feedstock for all animals, including ourselves, despite what you might read on the internet. And it can be chopped and dropped for mulching, and it grows and grows and grows and grows. And it's a bioaccumulator. It's kind of always sloughing off in the soil, and it's bringing up all sorts of minerals. We plant it under our fruit trees. And there it can grow tall and become a home for beneficial insects who you want there, to work on the veggie eaters that are up in the trees, causing trouble. So anyway, that's the turkey operation there, showing that. And here are the chickens. Now, this was where the tomatoes were earlier. When the tomatoes came out, we just started running our layers across the field, right over that clover. So they came and had amazing clover dinner and didn't kill it because they were only there a day. So there's still a lot of residue on the soil out there, keeping things somewhat happy for the microbial life.
Julie,
Yeah,
we've got a few questions that came into the chat if you want to
Sure.
take those now.
absolutely.
So in reference to mulching, Lex was asking, do you plant into mulch or mulch after transplanting? If after, at what stage of plant development?
Nice question. We've tried planting into mulch and it's really freaking hard. So usually what we do is plant first and then mulch. And it depends on the crop. So let's say a brassica. There's a lot of that going on, right? Cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, chard, collards, et cetera, et cetera. I would say ideally, also ideal, and when we get around to it are sometimes different timing, but ideally, if you have a plant in the ground, I think about 2 weeks to let it be well established, and then you could come in there and mulch around it. Earlier, the better. Definitely don't want to do it right after you transplant it. It's too hard on them to kind of come in there and mess around them. But, as soon as that crop, whatever that crop is seems like it can handle the handling that it's going to get when you come in and mulch, the sooner the better.
And
Was that all the question?
no, complete your answer because I have another one in reference to clover.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay, so in reference to clover, this question is, did the clover and the tomatoes seem to help with the heavy rains this year and mitigating disease?
Well, that's a good question. We did have heavy rains. It was, as I was looking through my pictures from 2020 and 2021, it's like, wow, it was a lot easier year in 2020 because it was more normal rain. And our tomatoes, however, in 2020 did not do as well as the ones in 2021. There were a couple things that were different. We did mulch them in 2020. We did use, a lot of the AEA products and the foliar stuff, but so coming to think of it, I think that we had a similar program, but maybe we're a little more aggressive with more soil drenches and stuff in 2021. We did not have disease on the tomatoes until late in the season. It wasn't my best year ever for tomatoes for sure, but we had a very good harvest of tomatoes for longer than I would have thought with all the water that we got. So, if one thing is true, it's variables are always different every year and you can never draw any firm conclusions about anything. So I always, one of the things you can do is like, oh, well, let's try the same variety. Let's try one of them heavily mulched. Let's try one in clover and have them right next to each other and don't change any other variables. And then you can maybe see in any particular year what kind of results you're going to get. But then, after having done this for 40 years on my own, I just I've learned to be extremely humble about what I think I know. So that answers that.
And the last question in this set is concerning daikon radish. What are the benefits of daikon as a cover crop?
Well, it goes deep. And we had some beautiful daikon and we started harvesting and actually giving it out to the CSA. They were, some of them this long, you can't even see in my picture here, they were very long and they will go in deep and just soften up the soil. And then if you leave them in the soil, they will die and they will become microbe food for the winter also. Now, I've known some people who actually planted daikon carefully and left it in, and then they came back in the spring and then planted their crop, whatever it was, right in the daikon hole. So then they were really feeding it from natural nutrition right there, right in the springtime. So it's a great thing, and you can eat it too if you want to.
I know it's a great tiller,
Yeah,
natural tiller.
yeah. Any other questions right now?
Margie just came in with a good one. Does interplanting clover with chard help prevent Cerasopora? I think I'm mispronouncing
I
that.
think that's the right, thing that, yes.
Okay.
And what I have found is, yes, it did this year. That's the Cerospora, I think is what it's called. Maybe it's got the spotty disease. I'm not very good with diseases or insects for that matter, but, when little tiny patches that were not clovered got that at the end of the season, and the ones that were clovered, I didn't see any of that Cerospora at all this year. So I love it in chard, and you do have to do a little bit of weeding of it out when it gets too excited and growing too strongly, but that's easy to do, as opposed to pulling lots and lots of weeds and dealing with disease issues, which is a drag. So any other questions?
No, that was it. You got them all.
Okay. The perennial strips in the vegetable areas. And this is, I went home after I read, I think, Michael Phillips's book. I'll read a book or I'll hear a speaker say, oh, I got to do this now. But we put in this perennial strip. Now the peppers are on the right hand side. And then there's this perennials along in a strip, just like it's 4-foot bed. It's just all sorts of things that we have. And then we have vegetables again on the far left. But that's right in that garden area that I was showing you, the garlic and the corn and all that stuff. It's and boy, when things are in bloom, we have so many pollinators. It's just buzzing with life. It's a great idea to have these strips if you can manage it. So recipes that we use for our foliar sprays from AEA, we have a transplant solution, which is high on calcium and potassium, low on sodium and nitrogen. Nitrogen and potassium. I'm sorry that I don't have enough time to really talk about starting seeds and starting seedlings and things like that. But, basically for vegetables, you want them to have a good shot from the start. And sometimes we're already dealing with low quality seed because a lot of the seed companies are not raising their seeds for nutrition. They're raising them more for standard, standard everything happening at the same time, looking the same. It's not the priority that it should be for most seed companies to have really strong seed. And so we have to really help them out as much as we can. And one of the things that I'm going to probably go back to this year is to soak seeds. And I'm going to be working with, I'll work with the AEA to get exactly the right seed soak. But to soak them, if they're going to be going into the ground, soak them, or even if they're going to be going into potting soil, soak them overnight, and then kind of take them out and put them on a paper towel so that they can dry a bit so you can handle them. And then getting that good start. There's a product that AEA has called BioCoat Gold, which we put over all of our seeds. It's a mix of bacteria and fungi and a few other things that are going to really enhance their germination, because you want things to germinate immediately. You don't want nitrogen, you don't want potassium. That's what makes them too soft and weak stemmed and not powerful. Calcium, think about calcium and phosphorus as what we have in our bones, and it's the same thing for plants. They need to have good, strong bones, and so that's what we transplant with those, focusing on those things. And then once things are in the field, we have a vegetative spray that we do once a week for fruiting vegetables. Once they get to that place of growing from their vegetative state to when they start fruiting, then we add more things like manganese, for example, that are needed for proper fruit, and potassium that for fruit development. Rejuvenate is a product that they have, which is like a molasses and some microbes and a few other things I'm not sure that we do in the bed turnover. So when we take a crop out and spray that on the bed, and then we come back in and then plant and then get going on the next system. Small fruit during cell division, more calcium, small fruit during cell expansion, and fruit set, more potassium. Tree fruit, same thing. Two kinds of sprays depending on the age, what's going on in the tree. And then there's a post-harvest fruit that we spray on the plants when these fruiting crops that are perennials need to be able to be healthy for the next year. So this has helped to set them up for the next year. Thinking about a person, if you want to get pregnant, what you really need to do is to really, enhance your nutrition before you get pregnant. So that's what we're doing in the fall, is to really doing what we can to support those trees and bushes that are constantly bearing, thousands and thousands of children. It's a lot when you think of it that way. So this is, we do a lot of this foliar spraying. It's very important. We do it once a day. Kelp, I can't say enough about kelp as a biostimulant, and you need to get a good quality kelp. And, if you're near, somebody was down on Nantucket Island, right? If you've got seaweed down there, harvest that and use it as a mulch. I mean, it's an amazing biostimulant. All right, so there's our backpack sprayer. It's a steel. It's about 3.5 gallons. We put in the water and the juice, and off we go. And here's Kathleen spraying a bed right after we took something out of there. She's spraying it, and then we'll plant the plants in there. So here's I was very happy about this particular sequence. I wanted to share it with you this year. This area that you see under the tarps was pasture, what you see to your left previously. And so in the fall, we actually sprayed some Rejuvenate to try to start breaking down things, and put down the tarps and the black tarp and the black bags. And so it's a strip all the way down the back side of our Westfield garden. It's about 200 feet long. And it was about, I guess those are 30-foot tarps. So, and then we took off the tarps, and you can see, you'll see some rock dust. We've put a lot of rock dust on there too, to really help with the mineral enhancement. And you can see the dead grass, but it's not really gone yet. But the roots are gone. They're dead. You were able to work through it, but there's still a lot of nice matter there. And so these holes were that these guys were digging were just for individual squash plants that we put in. And here's a nice shot of the squash later. As soon as the squash was up, somebody asked about when to mulch. When the squash plants are up, not so tall, this tall, maybe a little taller. We came in and mulched the hell out of it with hay, and never had to weed it again. It was one of the easiest things we did. And particularly when you take something out of pasture, you're not going to have any annual weeds anyway for the first year. But anyway, you can see how big and strong and healthy those plants are. And then these are some of the winter squash that we harvested from there. Amazing harvest of squash. And that was from it was pasture in 2020. And by the end of 2021, we got a huge harvest. So it was a success. Not everything we do is a success. Here's some pictures. I just want to show you what you can do if you really are cranking it in terms of fertility, what kind of crops you can get. This is chard from 2020. This was mulched in hay, actually, in 2020. Here's that chard and a bigger picture of it. You can see how massive those plants were. And when you start raising really high quality plants, more people have said to us, "Oh, I didn't think I liked Swiss chard. It's bitter. It's no good." But this stuff is it's like eating a steak when you eat this kind of plant that's really super nutritious and is really cranking on all of its levels, and has the secondary plant metabolites, and it has the ability to repel insects, et cetera, et cetera. So it's exciting to have crops that are this healthy. These are basil with mulch under them. And here's Stu riding in the back of the truck with our various things that we picked for the CSA that day. This is we had, I don't know if you remember 2020, we had frost 19, 20, 21, and 22 in September, and it killed a lot of stuff. Luckily this year that didn't happen, thank the Lord, because we had enough rain to give us a hard time. But this plant, I pulled this plant out to show you. Now this is the place where we had garlic. If you think back to the garlic and hay mulch, that's the same bed, same area. And behind me there is the perennial row of plants. But these plants were so incredibly massive, and it was such a shame that we couldn't let them grow much longer to provide, that much more food. And here is Mish with we had 17 containers worth of peppers. We ran out of time and left a lot of them out in the field, and they got frozen that night. But it was, again, another example of a fantastic harvest. Doesn't happen every year to every crop, and it's always different which one's going to do well. But we're set up for a lot of success in this field because we've mulched it so heavily and used a lot of cover crops. We had that perennial strips. You'll see blackberries on her left there and blueberries behind her. So there are a lot of perennials around in here that are attracting all sorts of insects and such, but something to aspire to. And here's some carrots. We usually do really super beautiful carrots in the fall. It's something we've been able to figure out. And these were our parsnips in 2020, also massive. And this was a shot in 2020. There was another big frost early in November, and we just went out and spent days, an entire week of just harvesting before it got too cold, and just kept filling up our root cellar fuller and fuller of stuff. That was a little example of the bounty. This is a tree this year that had 2,000 pears on it. I decided to count them as we harvested them. And these are Bartlett pears. And, back in the day when we would get pears from here anyway, but they weren't very tasty. They were kind of rock hard, and then they would rot before you were able to eat them. But these guys, just fantastic, eating right off the tree, and 2,000 pears on that tree this year. I just put this one in, I guess, just to show some, again, this area is heavily mulched. We've got corn, which has the cover crops coming up under it, and green beans, and then some leeks and some onions, and then that perennial strip again. We are in the garden again. Just kind of get a view of how we do things, I guess. Here's some of the garlic. You can see it was mammoth this year. We just harvest it, chop it off, wash it, and then put it up in the barn floor to dry with fans on it. And we've had, almost no rot on that at all this year. This is a Prima apple tree, which, again, I didn't count the apples on this tree, but they were just phenomenal. And the taste is, just amazing. And we're eating applesauce all the time now, right now. I'm enjoying it so much. And these were some fennels that were in that same garden area. You can see how things, when they have the opportunity to meet their full potential, how they can really grow to, and I've never seen fennel like that before on our farm. That was exciting. And there are peaches cranking along. This is an old tree. It's been around for, I think it's maybe 20 years old, and it's very old, and we've lost some branches, but it's still cranking up most beautiful, tasty peaches. And these are our peas, a wall of sugar snap peas that are, again, it's another crop that we usually do pretty well with year after year, but you can see what you can get from your peas in ideal situations. So I always want to talk about our goals a little bit. I wrote this up, I think, last year, and I just wanted to talk about this. Balancing practicality in the moment with long-term soil and ecological improvement while planning for maximum productivity and economic sustainability. A lot of words there, but that balance is a big word, important word. Make our farm a place for people to learn how to work in a context of nature, grow as sensitive human beings, stretch their personal boundaries, earn food, earn an economic living, engage in an alternative lifestyle. Whole nother story, a whole nother workshop on staffing, I guess. Engage in a very diverse system that includes annual, perennial, vegetables, herbs, trees, fruits, et cetera, with the goal of building and improving the carbon balance in the soil. Raise food of the highest nutrient quality possible. That's really my major goal, is to raise the best food we possibly can. And take a stand and live a life of fearlessness in the face of pandemics that celebrates enhancing the gut biome to do its job, supported by crops that are supported by a diverse and healthy soil biome. As a farmer, promote and practice the principles that put forth that food can be medicine. So this one I think is very important to me, that, you know, in this time of pandemics and vaccinations and you know, all the division that's going on, and the, you know, forcing people to get vaccinated unless they want to lose their job or not go to school, or all the things that are happening with people. I think that NOFA needs to continue to stand up for the fact that, you know, its true health comes from real food and from a healthy microorganisms in our body that are raised in soil that is healthy and with a very diverse microbiology. And this is all stuff that we know and have learned and somehow have forgotten in this pandemic time, that really I'm going to trust my immune system based on what I do to raise my food over anything else that's out there. And that's, you know, that's where we stand on this whole topic. And I just want to point that we haven't yet found the right person. We're looking, we might be there, but we are hiring right now. If anybody's interested in working on a place where we're somewhat iconoclastic and we don't necessarily go along with the crowd time. Practices to remember: multi-species winter kill cover crops, late August, late September, intersown in living crops or on finished crop areas. Intersown crimson clover and shorter cover crops early, under brassicas, tomatoes, corn, etc., to enhance crop health, starting in early July as plants are big enough. Early cover crops on areas that won't be implanted until early June. We've done that with oats and peas, and early on had planted them nice and early in the soil where we, I can't remember what we put in there, celery, I think maybe, but we had them in there. They grew up nice. We mowed them down and we, you know, planted the celery in there, and that was 2020, fantastic celery. Using silage tarps strategically throughout the season for succession crops, and if grass has gotten ahead of you, we have put it down when the grass did get ahead of us, and we just mowed down crops and then put those tarps down to start over again. Cardboard and hay over winter when grasses take over and or improve fertility is particularly wanted. I'm using a little less cardboard this year, but I think cardboard is ideal in your perennial systems. Just keep laying it on and keep putting the wood chips on, and that's the best way you can handle, you know, manage all sorts of aspects of your perennials. Leaves, hay, straw, wood chips for mulch. Maximize keeping the soil covered. Living is best. I think this is like beat it into your heads, and I have to beat it into my heads all the time. How am I going to keep that soil covered? When I take a crop out and it's bare for a while, I need to figure out how I'm going to get that covered as soon as I can. And especially as I go into winter, make sure that there is something growing there so that those microbes aren't starving to death in the winter. We just have to make sure that they are as viable as possible. Living is better on your soil, but dead as necessary, as in, you know, heavy mulches or whatever. Sometimes I've planted mulch, laid mulch, and then planted clover into the mulch too. That's another possibility. Animals in rotation whenever and wherever possible. You can't beat having the animals in your system. We've had them from the start on our farm. I'm so happy for that. And then well-targeted foliar sprays and soil drenches. So those are kind of the practices that we're trying to remember to juggle all the time when we're, you know, making all those decisions in season. Online education, it's so easy now. I'm a lot older than a lot of you, but we didn't have the internet back in the day. But now we have it, and you can find whatever you want to learn on the internet. And if you like to read books, that's great too. It's really fantastic. And I think now is a good time of year to do that. John Kempf is the owner of Advancing Eco Agriculture. He's a young guy. He's still in his early 30s. He's been at this since he was in his early 20s. He's a savant, and he understands plant nutrition like nobody does. And he also believes that healthy crops are possible without insects and disease if we really work with the system in a way that really supports them. The Soil Owner's Manual is a nice book that John Sticker wrote. How Plants Create Healthy Soil is a webinar that I think I had seen last year that I really liked. Maximizing photosynthesis is really where we're at. You gotta have enough carbon dioxide, enough water, enough sunlight, and don't forget the manganese and the iron, because those help along with they help make the photosynthesis happen, and they're sometimes the limiting factor. Top-notch resources: Advancing Eco Ag, Soil Health Academy, Tineo Technologies, the Bionutrient Food Association, Christine Jones, Amazing Carbon. She's really my go-to on all things cover crop. Graham Sate, he's the guy that turned me on to carbon sequestration in the first place. He's in Australia, and he has a great monthly podcast. And if you want to make all those brews and things, make your own microbes, he talks about that kind of stuff all the time. He's a great resource. And there's a little snapping turtle that we found in the field when we were harvesting potatoes. I thought it was so cute. And I think that's the end of my workshop.
Wow. Well, that's a lot of information. I think I've got about 5 pages full of notes back to back. We do have some questions that came through if you want to take those now.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to talk to people in person if they want to unmute.
Sure. So let me put that out there for those who put questions in the chat. If you want to ask those questions directly, feel free to take yourself off of mute one at a time and ask those questions. And if you prefer us to read them to Julie, either way. But Eileen, you're first in the queue. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask Julie your question directly?
Where's Eileen?
Eileen Bellwood. She's asking about crimson clover. Do you plant it every year or allow it to self-sow?
In our situation, we're in Central Mass, 1,000 feet up, a lot different than Boston, a lot different than the Valley even. It usually dies, and so we usually plant it again every year. It could be a bit of a challenge for you if you don't have something to take it out, if you are in a place where it doesn't die, but it's not like rye in that sense. It's not like vetch, which are really monster plants.
Margie, if you are still on the line, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. You have a great one about peppers here.
Great. Thank you very much, Julie. This has been very informative, and I love seeing the photos. Now, we try growing, we grow peppers every year. They're a wonderful crop, but we often end up buying starters because we have a really hard time getting the seeds to germinate. And you mentioned a BioCoat Gold, and I'm wondering if that might help. Do you use that on all crops? And I also wonder if we should also be soaking the seeds overnight. And do you soak them and then dry them out a little bit and then coat them?
Yes. I mean, I don't always do the soak. It's something that I used to do, and I kind of got away from it. Sometimes when you're doing it as long as I do, and I've had people come back like 10 years later, well, you used to do this. Why aren't you doing that anymore? I said, oh, I forgot. There's just stuff that you pick up these good things at a workshop or something and then forget to do them. But yes, ideally, I would get yourself a good seed soak, and I would, talk to AEA about that. I trust them. Tineo Technologies is another, they work hand in hand, those guys. Tineo comes up with a lot of those biologicals that they sell, like BioCoat Gold. And they have a few other things that they do. But yes, at least I would open up all your seed packets. If you're not going to soak things, open up all your seed packets when you get your BioCoat Gold and throw it in there and make sure everything's been covered with it. If you are going to soak, I put together a nice seed soak, and I can't give you a good recipe right now. I don't remember. Sorry, I don't want to say something wrong, but find a good seed soak, and yes, just a little bit in water, and then just, I don't even know if it needs to be overnight, maybe 4 to 6 hours or something, and then kind of take them out with a slotted spoon and put them on a paper towel so that they can dry, and then you're able to go ahead with them. But then the other thing we do is we get our potting soil from Mike Lombard, Ideal Compost. I really like his potting soil, but I'm sure there are other good ones out there. But then we also will put together our transplant drench that I talked about. And if those kinds of things, I can send people our recipes if you'd like, for some things like transplant drench. We soak the seed flat in that. And then we put the seeds into it. And then we put some more transplant drench into the seed flat, and as it's first watering. And you'll find in those kind of situations that all of a sudden, seeds will germinate in like 3 days. We don't have mats, we don't have lights. All we have is our house is passive solar design, and we have a little 10 by 14 greenhouse that's attached on the south side of the house. And that's where we raise stuff. So it's kind of a cold, natural system, which I think makes for sturdier seedlings also. We also start them much later than a lot of people do, because we start stuff in February, and it's, stuff like peppers, they can't handle anything in the way of cold. So you want to start them later, maybe April 15th in our situation. And so there are a lot of things to think about. Like I say, the whole seedling starting is a massive topic. Another thing that John Kempf talks about is growing your seedlings for shorter periods of time, getting them outside after 3 to 4 weeks. A lot of times people are growing stuff for 8 or 12 weeks. So they're growing them in cells, which I hate, because the cells don't allow, I don't think, enough room for root growth. We just put them in open 10 by 20, 10-inch by 20-inch flats that have holes in the bottom, and then there's a rack that you can pour the water through. And so we don't want the roots to ever be compromised. And those cells that people use, I think they're the worst thing that's ever been developed for seedlings. Again, I'll tell you, I disagree with a lot of people on a lot of things, and that's another one. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, Margie. There's another question here concerning mulching again. Jan M., do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Julie. It's Jan.
Oh, hi, Jan. Jan Martin. How you doing?
I'm good. And I hate cells too.
Well, we were both born in 1953. That's why, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I guess we did. So anyway, but I had forgotten. I'm sure you told me before that you mulch with hay, not straw. Don't you get any seeds growing, any hay fields growing?
I mulch with whatever I can find. And this year, someone hooked me up with some straw, actually, that we're going to get this spring. I'm very excited about it. But yes,
yeah,
hay grows. Every mulch has its problems. Like if you try to put wood chips on annual ground, it's a little bit hard on the plants until it breaks down. Hay grows sometimes. Leaves can mat. Everything's got its problems, but you have to kind of just figure out what you can afford, what's available, and sometimes you have to weed your mulch.
No, I read Ruth Stout.
Ruth Stout, she's the one, yeah.
She said, well, if you're too lazy to pick up the hay and turn it over, I can't help you. It was pretty funny. Good to see you.
You too.
Karina has a question concerning perennials and planting in rows. And Karina, I think you're still here. You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask this question a little deeper.
I don't even remember what I asked.
Which perennials do you plant in the rows?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was your
Yeah.
question. Mhm.
Yeah.
What was the question? Which perennials where?
Do you
in the
plant
perennial
them?
strips?
Oh, whatever you want. You know, I can't even remember all the names of the stuff that's in there, but gosh, if you like flowers, perennial herbs, and we sometimes put stuff in, then we forget, we, you know, swear we're going to keep track of what it was we had there, but you know, some combination of things that are going to flower at different times, potentially not be too tall, so that they don't fall over and or shade out your other crops. We have some, you know, peppermint and spearmint and what's that other one? Lemon balm, and you know, we have some walking onions in there. We have some perennial kale in there. All sorts of stuff. Whatever you like. And just be aware that if it grows really tall, it might fall over, number one, or shade, number two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Velma, you had a question about irrigation. If you're still here, feel free to unmute yourself. It's a good question too.
Can you hear me?
Hi.
Go right
Donna.
ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I
was
see you
just cu-
too?
I don't have,
Oh, you don't have a
yeah, I don't have a
no
webcam.
worries. No worries.
I was curious about your method of irrigation. I was just in the previous talk about water quality, so now it's all I can think about.
Mm-hmm.
So
We
do you
don't
have-
we don't irrigate.
Oh, you don't irrigate at all
No.
because of all that good mulching?
Well, that, and we live in an area that gets more rain than where do you live?
Littleton, Mass?
In Littleton. Yeah. No, it's funny that we are right back up against the Quabbin Reservoir, which is the water source for Boston. And they took out 4 towns back in the 30s, and it's a big lake. And it's big enough that I do believe we pick up, we're on the east side of it. So we pick up the prevailing winds, bring perhaps some storm centers that develop over the Quabbin. And we, you know, when the rest of the state, when Western Mass and Eastern Mass are in drought, we aren't. That's generally the case, which is nice. But the other thing that, yes, high organic matter, active soil structure. If you have a lot of worms under there doing their thing, there's going to be, you know, they're making tracks for the rain when it comes to come down and then really get into the soil and then to stay there. And if you do have mulch on your soil, that's going to help from evaporation. For starters, you won't lose anything via evaporation. And you're also constantly feeding your microbes. They love mulch. They just love it. You know, the worms love it. The bacteria love it. They all love it. And you'll see fungi will have, you know, you can see the fungal networks in the hay. And then all of a sudden, if you're lucky, you'll have mushrooming happening too, you know, the mushroom bodies coming in. That's how we avoid that, and the fact that we're in a wetter area than some folks are. We don't do any irrigating.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, well, I think you can be lucky too. If you can have a little oasis wherever you are in a very small area. You can bring in all sorts of life. They find you. And you know, you can really change things around and roost out, you know, as Jan mentioned, when she would mulch like 24 inches deep. She was a serious mulcher. You should look at her stuff sometime.
I will.
But yeah, it's and if your water quality is important too, by the way, so you don't want to be watering with chlorine, for example, which is a lot of town water. You can get reverse osmosis setups for that. You want to make sure that you're not putting chemicals into your soil via your water source. And you know, again, you can check those kind of things out with AEA, but there are other sources around. I think that agrodynamics used to have those kind of reverse osmosis units and stuff too, but check those things out. It's really worth it if you are going to be watering, to make sure that your water is pure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Julie, Lex has a question about soil drenches. So Lex, if you want to come off of mute and ask your question directly, feel free.
Lex must be on another square here. Let's see.
It's concerning a fertigator. Do you use a fertigator to do soil drenches or do it by hand?
We have a little, what's it called? We have a little thing that you, a Mazzy flow, that's what it is, that we, because we actually do drench through, the black tape, drip tape in our hoop houses. We have to drench in there because there's no rain coming in. And we have a little bit of it's called a Mazzy flow. It kind of sucks up the water, and you can put the fertility in the bucket, and the water comes through and it takes it out to the drip tape. When we are drenching on the field, we just put it in the backpack sprayer and spray the soil.
Lex, I hope that answered your question. I don't know if you had a follow-up, but feel free if you have a follow-up question to take yourself off of mute. Bart Church had a good question concerning winter cover crops. And Bart, I think you're still here. If you want to come off of mute to ask this question directly, that would be great.
Yeah, I was asking about winter cover crops, and with like the winter seem to be getting more and more chaotic. What cover crops do you think kind of last the best and are the most kind of robust?
Vetch, hairy vetch, and winter rye. And and make sure you have a tarp that you can pull out and use when you want to take that out later. Where do you live? Where do you live, Bart? You're on mute.
I'm living in Northampton now and moving to Greenfield.
Okay, so you're a little warmer than we are. The thing with vetch and rye is you need to remember that you're not going to get a lot of what I want to say, killing, I guess is the best word. You're not going to kill the rye and the vetch that quickly until the soil warms up. So when you're thinking about wanting to plant your early crops, that might be as early as April for you, or even March, maybe not in Greenfield, but you aren't going to want to have rye and vetch in there, because you can't, with a tarp, you're not going to be able to kill them in enough time. Those are the kinds of things that if you can plan ahead a year out, you always want to be planning 6, 8, 12 months in advance. And the best thing in those kind of situations where you want to plant early would be probably something like peas and daikon and oats. Oats are amazingly good for cleaning the soil. And daikon, as we talked earlier, is very good at rototilling for you and providing food for microbes and that kind of aeration, etc. And the legumes are always good for nitrogen fixation and such. So thinking about early crops, if you want to plant early, plant something that will winter kill. And if you want to plant, if you can wait till maybe May 15th or June 1st or later, then use the vetch and the rye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And these are great questions, and the responses are amazing. We still have some time for those who want to ask additional questions or any follow-up questions. Just take yourself off of mute and feel free to ask Julie your questions at this time. And while folks are thinking of questions, we just put some information for the rest of the conference in the chat, our auction link. We mentioned that earlier. They have, I believe there's some AEA products. I'm sorry, the AEA products are actually in the bulk order, which we have that link up, as well as our vendor marketplace and our evaluation link. We would love to have your evaluation of this workshop and all the workshops, so feel free to take advantage of that. and use that link to take our evaluation. So if there's any additional questions at this time, we'd love to have them. Julie, thank you once again. This was really an informative and wonderful workshop. And just to plug the farm, we took the youth from Home City Housing, which is part of our food access program. They came out to Many Hands Farm, helped put the hay on the truck, did a great job with mulching. It was a great lesson for them in mulching and cover crops. They still talk about that, Julie.
Oh, good.
And they really had a good time with that. So if you ever are in the area, please stop by her farm, and the vegetables are amazing and beautiful.
And also, just
go ahead.
to say too that, yeah, if you ever want to come visit, what I encourage people to do if they have a lot of questions, if they want to come and work for a day, work for a morning and have breakfast with us and lunch with us, and feel free to ask as many questions as you want. And we operate essentially with a lot of volunteers. We have some staff, but we patch together with a lot of volunteer labor, and we always enjoy having folks and sharing what we know.
Mhm. Very generous. And Bart had one more question about overwintering. Bart, you want to ask this question directly?
Well, it's just in thinking about whether to mulch or use cover crops.
Mm-hmm.
What are your kind of principles for making choices between those two strategies?
Well, I don't know if it's principle so much as practicality. What's going to go there next was one question. If you're planning for the next year, if you're in the present year, it's very hard to mulch lettuce. It's very hard to mulch radishes, turnip. The little what are those little white turnips called? Sorry. The little things that come in and go fast. Lettuce, it's hard to mulch because it just gets it in the lettuce and you can't harvest it very well. It's hard to mulch. Some things are just hard to mulch. They're really flat to the ground. So yeah, I just, it's a practicality question. But do you have a specific thing you're wondering about?
No, I'm not used to using cover crops in the winter. So I was just trying to think about, like, when do you always use a cover crop? When do you go with the mulch? And it sounds like it depends on what was planted and what you want to plant. And yeah.
And I think if you talk to the experts on the soil health people, it's having something growing that's green is the highest priority, as long as in the season as you possibly can. And if you can keep that in mind, you're going to have really good results, and you're going to not have erosion, and you're not going to have things drying out on you, and it's just, and you're going to have more insects showing up, more birds showing up. It's just, you are supporting a natural biodiverse system, which we desperately need in this world right now. And the little tiny patches of people doing it, you don't need a whole lot of land to make a huge difference in really improving our ecology. It's pretty exciting, really.
It's an exciting time. And Bart, I appreciate this comment. You are taking us home with this about honoring your wisdom and experience and the commitment to soil. And I know that personally and firsthand. So we really appreciate you. I appreciate you. And this has been a wonderful, wonderful workshop. And we put Julie's contact information in the chat. So feel free to reach out to her if you have additional questions. And as we come to the end of this fantastic workshop, this is just part one of our conference. Join us again tomorrow for part two. We're starting at 11 a.m. with our annual meeting, and then our keynote address by Precious Fury, which is something you definitely don't want to miss. I've had a chance to read some of her work and listen to a few of her recordings, and it's just amazing what she will be talking with us about tomorrow. And then later in the day, we have 2 roundtable discussions that will be very much of interest and will fit right in with this workshop. So thank you all once again. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 11 a.m. and be well. Thank you all.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Julie. This was great, and it was great to see you.
You too.
Julie.